Welcome to Business Talk here on Business Tech with me, Michael Avery, and we're talking today about the dollar life plan. Now, South Africans may find foreign life policies useful when planning their estate, and increasingly we're seeing a lot of people becoming more mobile. Obviously, COVID has put a bit of a dampener on that, but it is a long-run trend. We've got things like offshore endowment policies for investments, but foreign life policies are also very useful if you want to plan your estate, if you want life cover in hard currency or paid out in other countries. So to find out a little bit more about how this all comes together, it's a great pleasure to welcome Gareth Friedlander, who's the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at Discovery Life, a big innovator and disruptor in the space. Gareth, great to have you on the show. What is the dollar life plan?
Thanks, Michael. Pleasure to be here. The dollar life plan is essentially a life plan, except it is run authentically in US dollars offshore. So we've got a Discovery Life international branch based in Guernsey, and it is our self-same homegrown life insurance product, but denominated in dollars, premiums in dollars, benefits in dollars, pays out offshore anywhere in the world. And importantly, it's done we do kind of all the reporting requirements in the background. So we use the single discretionary allowance of R1 million a year. We do the reporting to the Reserve Bank all seamlessly. So there's no additional headache around Forex applications and all the implications around that. But that's all taken care of on our side. It's the only authentic offshore life protection policy in South Africa today, in a nutshell.
That is remarkable. And it also, I mean, if you look at the way foreign providers might be pricing the risk, I think we have a much more accurate way of pricing that risk here locally, knowing the client that you do. Now, why is there a need? I think is a big question here for offshore life cover. Why do we need this?
Yes, I mean, that is the question. And I guess it comes back to, well, why do you need any life insurance? And you need life insurance to obviously the simple things like covering liabilities like bonds, but ultimately to protect your family if a life-changing event happens to you. And how do you calculate that? How much life cover you need? Well, it's quite complex. You use assumptions on what is my family going to need for the next 20, 30, 40 years if something were to happen to me today and I were to pass away or be unable to earn an income. And that is a leap of faith. That's quite a difficult thing to know. And the world is increasingly global, as you mentioned earlier. I think we've seen the South African Globalisation Index double in the last 20 years, seeing stats kind of 1 in 28 people is moving countries every single year. You mentioned that it slowed down in the context of COVID. Our suspicion is that it will speed up post-COVID, because I think what COVID has done is kind of shown everyone that, you know, you can work from anywhere, and it's opened up all sorts of new opportunities around that. So we actually expect the trend to accelerate post-COVID. But the world is increasingly global, and you need to hedge your protection needs against hard currency. So, you know, when you think about an individual taking out that cover, you're not exactly sure where you or your family, your kids, your grandkids may be in 20, 30, 40 years' time.
Yeah.
And therefore, having some diversification and some hedge against rand depreciation risk seems the appropriate and responsible way to do that financial planning. Everyone seems to kind of do it in the investment space. It's kind of a given principle. You diversify offshore, and yet in risk planning, when you're dealing with far more uncertainty and longer time horizons, reducing that risk and creating that hedge, I'd argue, is even more important.
Absolutely. And I'd argue that when you're looking after your family, that's got to be, if you're the primary breadwinner, one of your major concerns. And to your earlier point, very difficult to forecast what's going to happen 10, 20, 30 years into the future. And so diversification is the responsible, the prudent thing to do. Not many people would have forecast the rand strength that we're seeing at the moment. Who knows which way we're going to turn in the next month in the political economy in South Africa. Now, when we look at the differences here between offshore life cover and local life cover, is the only difference the fact that it's dollar denominated? How do the two differ?
Right. So essentially, we have kind of copy pasted our benefits that we offer in our local plans and put them offshore in dollars. We have, however, added a couple of features to make them better and even more relevant from an offshore protection perspective. For example, on our severe illness that you would take out in dollars, we supercharge your sum assured by up to 250% of what you've taken if you were to need medical treatment overseas as a result of your illness. So there's a couple of features that we've put into our dollar life plan or supercharged in our dollar life plan to ensure even greater kind of a greater global edge to your protection. But ultimately, same benefits. You're just paying for them in dollars each month, and your benefits then pay out offshore in any country you want them to, but in US dollars at the point of claim.
Are you actually seeing an increase in people considering life cover because of the pandemic? Because we're seeing how fragile life can be, and how is this playing out in what you're seeing?
Yeah, so we're certainly seeing increased demand, people searching for life cover, a lot of the kind of leads coming through in that space. So I think COVID has really kind of shone a spotlight on the importance of life cover. We've seen, lower lapse rates during this period as well, where people are hanging on to life cover longer than they usually would. And we actually tend to see even lower lapse rates in our offshore plans, where people tend to look at that as this nest egg type of policy for their family that provides them real protection and hedges in terms of their long-term risk protection. So
let's touch on the family there, because I think it's an important point. If you look at how this offshore life cover is actually going to benefit your loved ones, is it your children or your spouse? Well, one doesn't know how the chips may fall one day, but what are the major benefits if you look at that cover and that peace of mind that it offers an individual?
So I think when you kind of drill down into the individual benefits that are on the dollar life plan, there's obviously life cover itself, which if you were to pass away, that would then pay out to your beneficiaries. If your beneficiaries are living offshore at that point in time, many people have children living offshore, that makes that whole process a lot easier, because that money is then already offshore and can pay straight into their bank account or their country at that point in time. From a benefit perspective, things like severe illness, the world is kind of changing. It's becoming increasingly specialized. The medical space, you're getting super specialist kind of hospitals popping up all over the world. So some of the rare types of cancer, you're seeing certain clients going to these various kind of centers of excellence around the world to get the top medical treatment there. And that can obviously be incredibly expensive. That's where something like dollar-based severe illness cover can be extremely valuable. And then
that's a great point. I'd never thought of that. That is such a good point. Because to your point, we really are seeing the emergence of these specialist hospitals that can only treat you in locations outside South Africa. And the last thing you want is to be hamstrung because you don't have cover in dollars. Now, sorry, I interrupted you there. Carry on with some of those benefits.
Absolutely. I mean, just kind of on your point there, obviously, we've got unbelievable kind of healthcare in South Africa. The private healthcare system is phenomenal. And yet, you do get these super specialist kind of centers of excellence that can be very expensive, the treatment itself, but also the upheaval for the family. So in many cases, you've got to go with your entire family overseas for months for that treatment, and the kind of side costs that tend to ramp up in those scenarios are significant. And people often don't think about that in the context of what protection you need. Other benefits, we've also got a dollar global education protection benefit aimed at protecting children's education. We've got the local equivalent, but on our dollar plan, it protects international schooling. So if something were to happen to you and or your spouse, and you were either to become disabled or pass away, we would then cover your child's schooling internationally. So at international level, schooling would be indemnified right from the earliest phases of education to tertiary education. And part of that benefit is also a shared value concept, whereby if you are healthy and you engage in vitality through our model, we also start funding your child's college education through that. So it's quite a neat feature. This was something that won a Global Innovation Award at the EFMA Accenture Innovation in Insurance Awards, I think in 2018. So really using our shared value concept of people being healthier and that creating value in the system, we funnel that value into funding children's education abroad. So college level funding, just by being
great example of that shared value thinking in practice, and to see the Discovery chassis come into play just like that. Now, when we look at the advantages of currency diversity, and obviously there's some hedge against a weakening rand, but what do you see as the major advantages of currency diversity, and I guess within that, global diversification as well, when it comes to reducing risk?
So I think there's a few reasons that you'd think about it. There's obviously clients who would genuinely have offshore liabilities and a business that operates offshore, and there's a perfect match. But then, as we said earlier, there's the client who, is just looking to diversify risk in terms of where will their liabilities be in the future. Even if you're fully based in South Africa now, and so is your whole family, there is obviously increasing globalization, and you want to diversify against that risk in the future. And then I'd argue that, even if we are fully based in South Africa and us and our family will always be in South Africa, we're certainly not immune to rand depreciation. Everything that we do, our cost of living, is impacted by the currency. So having your risk cover diversified in that sense, even for clients who have no thoughts about ever being abroad, we'd argue that it's still important to have at least some elements of your cover in a hard currency to diversify against that risk.
Why specifically the dollar in a hard currency? I mean, there's the yuan, there's the euro, pounds. Why the dollar?
So I think essentially, given that we were looking at it from a diversification perspective, the thinking is that you're looking at having some of your cover in rands, which is kind of where you're living, and an element of your cover in a hard currency. We didn't want to over complicate the financial planning around this. The dollar is by far the most broadly used currency internationally. I think something like 40% of international debt is in dollars. 90% of kind of international trading involve the dollar in some way. So it is the most broadly used currency. But bear in mind that at the point in time that you claim, you can always have it paid out and converted into any currency you want. So it's denominated in dollars for the duration of the policy. But if you were to claim tomorrow, we would pay out your $1 million in any country in the world. And at that point in time, you can obviously convert that back into rands if you so wish, or into another currency at that point. So there's real flexibility.
Well, premiums denominated in dollars not be more volatile?
Yes, that's a good question. So, of course, because you are paying your monthly premium in dollars, when you're converting rands, that would typically jump around a little bit as the currency fluctuates month on month. So we put a lot of thought into how we can protect clients against that type of volatility. And we've recently launched a concept called our Vitality Exchange Rate Protector, which essentially allows clients to lock in a preferential exchange rate for the first 3 years of their policy. So for example, at the moment, we're running an offer on our dollar policy where we're locking in 10 Rand 90 to the dollar for the first 3 years of the policy. At the end of 3 years, we then repeg it at a discounted rate to what the prevailing exchange rate is at that point in time, lock it in again for another 3 years, and then we do that process again from years 7 to 9. So we've looked at really providing a protection mechanism against that monthly volatility that not only locks in your kind of rand, your rand dollar exchange rate, but also locks it in at a significant discount. And so it's valuable on the one hand, but also provides that certainty over a 9-year period, which is a significant period of time. So that's been a new release on our dollar plan that's proving incredibly attractive and really providing clients with that certainty. Remember, that only applies to the premiums. So your cover is still in dollars. If the rand depreciates, your cover still grows with that, effective depreciation. But we provide you with that protection on the premium side that you're not. It helps you with your budgeting. That this is how many rands I'm actually going to be paying for my dollar life plan.
Absolutely. That certainty is critically important. And I think also shows you the kind of innovative thinking that you bring to the table, which brings me to my last question. I was going to say, why should I take out an offshore policy with Discovery Life? I think many people will be asking, why not?
Yes. So, I think, given that the dollar life plan is the only offshore policy available in South Africa, I guess your option is take the dollar life plan through Discovery Life or try and find offshore protection through a provider overseas. And we can be proud of our South African insurance market. We are seen as global leaders in terms of innovation. We were really proud as Discovery. We won the Global Innovator of the Year last year and were ranked second this year. So we as a country are right at the cutting edge of innovation in insurance. And when you actually compare what you can get from a benefit perspective relative to what you could buy at an overseas insurer if you wanted to protect or hedge your offshore protection, we're actually in a completely different space. The other thing that the dollar life plan allows, I already touched on our shared value model in the context of that education protection product, but we've got it more broadly in the form of paybacks. So as clients engage in health and wellness, become healthier, improve their vitality status, we know that reduces the risk on our side, and we then pass that back to clients through what we call a payback benefit, which essentially pays back up to 50% of the client's premiums that they pay for this dollar policy. The beauty around that payback is that it accumulates in dollars and then pays offshore. So alongside having that kind of diversified, authentic offshore risk protection, you can use your health and wellness to start building an asset offshore as well to supplement retirement savings. So that's quite a unique feature that's not really available elsewhere. And we think provides a really valuable proposition.
Just seems to be an absolute no-brainer. If you look at the interest rate differentials between the US and South Africa, there is a structural trend of depreciating rand over time, and having this bolt hole, this protection and diversification in terms of a life cover plan offshore denominated in dollars that offers all of these benefits and features, to me seems like an absolute no-brainer when it comes to prudent financial planning. Gareth Friedlander, Deputy Chief Executive Officer at Discovery Life. It's little wonder that Discovery is walking away with all the accolades when it comes to innovation in this space. Thanks for talking to us here on Business Talk on Business Tech. Take care.